Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Whales of Wall Street. We have a Vechain video ahead of us today, VET on the exchange. This is a project that I've held probably since around March or April 2020. Found it through the channel Cheeky Crypto back then, and I've held on to it ever since and continue to accumulate this one as well. We'll go into the chart a bit later, but I just wanted to have a quick touch on topics relating to supply chain management, which is what Vechain is heavily involved with, and how that can be incorporated. And we'll look at the management systems, the value of that as a market, but also look at the trade finance and everything, and trade industry in general as a market as well. It's something that we've covered quite a few times on various different project videos over the last 6 to 12 months, to be honest, especially with trade finance becoming a big heavy topic right now. But we'll look at Vechain's potential integration into all this and why I'm still accumulating and why I'm excited about this project and in general the industry overall. Similarly to how I'm passionate and excited about the energy sector, healthcare, etc., all relating to blockchain. So before we go into that, don't forget to also make sure that you smash that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Welcome to the channel if you're new, and welcome back if you are a previous and existing subscriber. Flowing towards the 10,000 mark, so massively appreciate support. And as always, don't forget to drop your comments below, any projects you want us to cover, or any other details. Vechain in general, I couldn't believe this. The last video I did was December 2021. Absolutely mental. But for sure, I've had a bit of focus on some of the CBDCs and the finance industry, the trade industry. But yeah, let's pull some of these back into the equation. So yeah, if there's any from the past or any new ones you want us to cover, let us know. So here we go. Vechain, very new website here. I haven't seen this personally. It might have been here for some time, but it's looking a lot fresher than it used to in the past. It's slightly disappointing in some senses because they did a really good job previously about all the different sectors that they covered. But in general, what we're going to be talking about today is the supply chain mechanism, because this has a massive integration with a lot of the other things that we talk about. We talked about the tokenization of trade in general, utilizing blockchain, etc. We can talk indeed about IoT and AI data. We can talk about supply demand, the forecasting. But before we do that, we can see, like from this article in particular, which is fantastic. I'll leave all the links in the description. I'm trying to do that more often as well for you guys. But this article is very interesting about the expectations of the existing supply chain management system. Now, before we go into like the values of these markets, I think it's important to understand some of the things here as to what problems we've got that blockchain as a solution can provide, but also companies like Vechain, who are supposed experts in this field, to be able to implement these correctly and build the ecosystem that they want to build. So some things, like if we can cast our minds back, I think it was like a year ago or maybe even 2 years ago now, where we had that Suez Canal issue with the freight boat switching sideways and getting stuck, and it basically created a catalyst across the world of your elongated supply forecasting and changes to when things would be received and sent, etc. So there's all these kind of things relating to this now, to the topic of conversation of how can we improve the supply chain. And there's a lot of things here mentioning about port congestion, which kind of relates to that topic I just mentioned, not necessarily because the boat was stuck there and loads of boats were stuck around it. The fact of the matter is that then backlogs. And honestly, you guys, it's actually quite fascinating. You can go on like, I can't remember the website name, but you can see like where all the boats in the world are right now live. And it's absolutely staggering, like it is with planes, how many freight and cargo ships there are out there. And actually you think, oh, they're miles away from each other. But actually the speed at which they can come together and get stuck is phenomenal, how fast that can happen. And when that does happen, you can't just have 10 boats turn up at your port all of a sudden. It's absolutely chaos. So it's incredibly interesting to see actually how the development of forecasting, supply and demand can improve with blockchain. We'll talk about that in more detail in a second. But this aspect here is talking about things like unexpected delays, which is mentioned, rising risks in supply chain. That could be economic, it could be about materials, and then therefore people don't know how long things will take to manufacture or receive or send, and all of those kind of things as well. Collaboration and syncing of data across the supply chain. This is a big one, guys, because this is about, first of all, interoperability, the ability for frameworks and networks to talk to each other in the supply chain mechanism, and many other things as well. And on that topic, really randomly, I was speaking to someone the other day in the car, because we were on our way to football. And he was mentioning to me, because he works heavily in supply chain worldwide. He's been doing it since the 70s. And I said to him, have you guys started implementing blockchain yet? And he said, absolutely not yet. But it's absolutely something that is on our radar that is looking to be integrated as soon as possible. So they're actually trialing, piloting tests right now. And this is one of the biggest supply chain networks in the world, by the way, logistic wise. And it was really interesting. I can't delve too much further detail of the company and stuff, but it was really intriguing to hear his thoughts about what is and isn't working and why blockchain hasn't fully come in yet. And that's totally understandable because we're still in a development stage. We're still learning how to integrate these frameworks. And his biggest thing, he said, was about synchronizing of information and the synchronization of different countries' frameworks and networks, because every country uses a different framework, every business uses a different framework. And it's about how do we then bring all those together through not necessarily just one huge system, but an integration of a new development of system, i.e. blockchain. And it was really interesting to get his insights on that. And what I'm going to be doing, hopefully in the next few months, because he's massively busy, he's all over the world all the time. It's just literally this week, fortunately in the UK, and we all went to the Spurs game together. Basically, I'm going to get him and someone else as well from the other side, i.e. the blockchain side, who knows, it might be Vechain, to have a big conversation about it, because from his side, he can talk very heavily about the existing system that's been around for decades, and someone else from the blockchain side can speak about what can be done. And it'd be really interesting to see that back and forth discussion, pros and cons and all of this kind of stuff as well. So very interested to see how that develops, and we'll keep you posted on that. But a few other things quickly before we go on to some of the things that can be improved. Digital transformation, this is the big part I was talking about, IoT and AI, drones and robotics. We'll talk about that in more detail. We've got things like difficult demand forecasting. I worked heavily with distribution, both as partners and also working for distribution over a few years now in my career thus far. It's very interesting to see demand forecasting and how that dramatically changed when things like Amazon Prime, etc. came about. It's about 10 years ago now, Black Friday, all of these kind of things. And how that changed the philosophy of retail and everything, the whole structure. It went from people were expecting orders to happen throughout December, and actually they were happening a few months before because of the Black Friday events. And then it literally triggered this whole entire change around the world of how people, from a behavioral perspective, buy and sell things. It was absolutely incredible to watch that firsthand. So interesting experience from my side to see that in fruition. But I want to quickly talk about IoT and AI, because this will probably come into the aspect of things like automation, processing, end-to-end visibility, all of these kind of things that are part of the things that can be overcome and integrated, before we talk about some of the mechanisms of blockchain as well in this topic. So IoT and AI I've pulled out here, and robotics and everything like that. It's all very well put in these wonderful words. IoT, by the way, is Internet of Things, basically anything that connects to the internet and can work and talk to each other on a internet communication basis, right? So keep that in mind. When we're talking about blockchain and in terms of the efficiency and transparency, there's a multitude of channels and avenues we can go down in this discussion. From the IoT and AI side is very interesting to me. We talk about this a lot on IOTA, for example, using its DAG protocol, Direct to Cyclic Graph, the ability for all these devices and frameworks and networks to talk to each other simultaneously within milliseconds, based on data and algorithm. What do I mean by this? And I always use that interesting example about drones, for example. The ability for a drone to know when to seed and harvest crops based on the algorithmic data of when people buy things, when people consume things, what time of year, the environmental impacts, for example. Oh, in the next month, we know because the weather data is telling the infrastructure that the drones are using that actually don't seed today because it's going to rain tomorrow or the next week or whatever. The best solution of time to seed and everything is this time. And all based on everything coming together through this one system, i.e. blockchain. Now, that doesn't mean there's going to be one solution. We know there's a multitude of projects and technologies out there, and we know there's companies like Quant, for example, that are creating the interoperability factor for all these chains to talk to each other and work with each other. But there's a multitude of those as well at various different layered stages. You've got layer 0, 1, 0, 1, 2, maybe 3 now. I can't remember what we're on now. But it's that point of principle, guys, that eventually everything we do as a consumer, everything businesses do, will all be operated within this system. And how this affects the supply chain management aspect is the fact that at the moment, everything is roughly forecasted manually. For example, you'd have sales teams in companies that would go, oh, well, I predict we're going to sell this amount of product, therefore we need to manufacture this amount. That goes through the chain, can take a couple of weeks. Then the manufacturing process, then, oh, what do we do? Do we do airmail? Do we do sending it via ship because it's cheaper, but albeit longer? And then there's that emphasis of like the products could come over, something economic could happen within that time, and then you might have trouble shifting it, or there might be trouble with the supply chain aspects of getting it delivered in time, all of these things. And literally, if you take it back to the grassroots, majority of the time, it is all manual based. There are very few companies out there that utilize either blockchain or a really enhanced automated efficient system. And these guys in this article here, mentioned about Walmart. This is really interesting. I've been to some of these head offices when I worked in retail and FMCG, and basically, honestly, it was like looking at NASA. These screens in this room were telling everyone to the millisecond what was the price of wood, what was the price of this metal, this packaging, this card, everything. So when a supplier came to this FMCG company and said, right, this is the cost we are giving to you, and these are the margins you get for profit and stuff, this supermarket was able to turn around instantly and say, your prices are too high and they should be this based on all of this data. I couldn't believe what I was seeing in front of me. The algorithmic data, the charts, the linear pricing at a millisecond of everything, every commodity, everything from food to the manufacturing of the packaging, everything. And it was incredible. And that was probably maybe them using a blockchain system at that time. I just didn't know it or was not aware of this kind of solution back then. But the format of this was that it could literally dictate when to bring in things, not to bring in things based on all this other aspect of information. And interesting here in Walmart's principle, they mention here that they use IPM, the IBM framework for all this. And that's the whole point, guys, is that this loop around effect of supply chain management is very important. That's why companies like Vechain are very important, because they have the ability to bring in this blockchain infrastructure for things like transparency. And I'm talking about transparency of costs. I'm talking about transparency of where that product has come from, i.e. the source. Are the people being paid correctly at each end? All of these things that can be adapted through things like QR codes, through RFID chips and tags. Here we mention here radio frequency identification. In fact, ironically, I believe Walmart were one of the first few to test that trial program with people having RFID chips, so they just pay for things as they walk out the door. And if you think about that automated process, rather than having to scan everything or whatever, because it's all chipped and whatnot, you just walk out the door, payment's done automatically, you're not doing anything. And because we're on blockchain in the near future, all those transactions are done within milliseconds, not coming out your bank and then being processed for 6-7 days. It's done there and then. Think how fast the economy can proceed faster, how companies can build quicker, and how people's lives will become arguably easier and quicker. It's really, really interesting, guys, to see this further development as this time goes by. Smart contracts, the ability to speed up the process of manufacturing orders, of supply orders, all of these things can be incorporated within blockchain and companies like Vechain as well. I think it's an absolutely fascinating topic, guys. There's, as I said, there's a few mentions here about what companies are using what systems and things like that. So here's Walmart's example. Walmart uses IBM's blockchain-based food trust to keep track of their products along every step of the chain. Nestle, Tyson Foods, Carrefour, and Raw Seafoods, among others, also use food trusts for this purpose. And that's basically determining like what is actually in this food, where does it come from, is the price correct, both from the supply side and also to the consumer, and also was it ethical, was it sustainable? Because more and more people are becoming more aware of this, and literally very soon you'll pick up a product, whether it's through your retina displays in the near future or through your chip, it will tell you actually you don't want to touch this product. And in fact, even way before that, the supermarkets and everything will be able to determine whether they should indeed sell your product or not because of all the information behind it already within that data tag. It's quite incredible, really. Walmart Canada uses DL Freight's supply chain invoice and payment platform to automate transactions and data points for more than 500,000 annual shipments, tracking these through GPS and IoT-enabled devices. It's incredible. The amount of opportunity here is phenomenal. As I said, I'll mention the price point in a second, but I just want to touch on this. Supply chain management systems, we'll talk about trade in general in a second, but this is a huge market, guys. 2022 is arguably worth around 28.9 billion US dollars, anticipated by 2027 to 45.2 billion. I think it'll be a lot higher than that with the integration of blockchain and stuff like that. This information here, from what I've read through thus far, doesn't even mention things too much about blockchain, but it does mention things like IoT, cloud computing. It does mention blockchain, but it doesn't go into like full detail about this, which is really interesting, that all this data is starting to think about ahead, that actually these numbers might change significantly. 3D printing, absolutely incredible. Robotics, digital supply network of the future, IoT, cloud computing, 5G, all of these have to be operative between each other. And that's why it gets really exciting about things like blockchain and Vechain's ability to be able to do this, guys. Absolutely interesting indeed. And global trade in general is huge. Imports and exports, guys. 28.5 trillion value in 2021. And I know the recent videos that we've done were showing significant numbers higher than this for 2022, and even massive, way more massive, towards the massive numbers that we're going to see over the next 5-10 years, specifically towards 2030, especially towards the sustainability goals as well. This is what it's all about, guys. They're avenuing themselves towards this goal for sustainability, traceability, verification, processing, everything to become automated. So we have full efficiency, and we have massive opportunity for scalability as well. Some things that we just can't do right now because of some of the issues that we've mentioned about the existing supply chain mechanism and how we can overcome those, but also provide a solution that's going to be something we can't even fathom on our heads right now, but is on the cusp of happening. And I think this is absolutely fascinating to really follow. And Vechain is one of those big, massive projects behind a lot of this kind of stuff. And the reason, as I said earlier, I mentioned this with its origins of being the superpower of supply chain in general around the world for however many decades now. They've got some massive data behind them, information and experience to be able to push this further. And it doesn't just stop there, guys. They are looking at things like the environment, the energy sector, etc. And looping back to that story, guys, is it all counts. It all works together. Literally everything. If you think of different things that you buy throughout the year based on the environment, or perhaps from certain countries, certain parts of the year because their weather's better or not better. We saw that weird news recently about shortages of tomatoes and stuff, which I think is a load of nonsense anyway. I think they're just improving prices and whatnot. But that principle is that actually the automated system wouldn't even have that as a problem anymore. It would just divert to something else based on algorithm, based on data, based on the information of inventory, harvesting abilities. Can you see what I'm trying to say here with all of this? It's really fascinating. But yeah, Vechain's going to have a really big part to play in this. And it's not just them, of course. There are others as well. But if you want to see the intro video for Vechain, I'll leave it at the end of this one. It's a fantastic project and topic overall. But I think that this is going to have a significant impact towards the supply chain management systems in the future. Let's know what you think about that in the comments below. But let's go straight into a bit of the chart action now that we've covered all those interesting topics about that. For me, Vechain, I'll let you into a little story about this for me personally from a trading perspective. I was buying a lot of Vechain around these kind of prices back in 2020, as I mentioned. It might have even been a bit lower than that. So here, for example, was roughly where I was purchasing a lot of it, just under 1 cent. And I was also buying Vechain all the way up really to around 10 cents, to be honest. And interestingly, the Vechain price went up to just under 30 cents in that big bull market that we had in 2021. So we're now back at these lower regions. Whether it comes down lower or not is yet remains to be seen. But my point being is that I made a bit of an error here in the sense that I don't usually trade too much. I don't really sell off too many projects, but I stupidly held on to this. And I do have a really, really good amount of Vechain, and I'm looking to accumulate even more of it now because I see the future of it and where we could go with this in the next bull cycles, maybe in a year or two. But for me, I made the mistake of not selling up those areas, even if I did some DCAing. And this was before I did some real good research about DCA strategies and management of risk and stuff like that. It's a bit different to now. So my instant thoughts right now really are about, okay, there's great opportunities for buying here, but I wanted people to see the overall picture that actually in the future, when we do hit those cycles, there are some great opportunities of growth from this point onwards. And this time round, I will for sure be doing various percentage stage incremental sell-offs as that goes up. And who knows, hopefully we'll get to that 30 cent mark again, and maybe even see even further than that as the cycle develops over time. But for me, definitely as this progress occurs, and I'll try and do more Vechain videos on a regular basis from now on, if you enjoy them and want them, and then we can start looking at those sell-off patterns as we go along. But in this region, in all honesty, from my perspective, my opinion, for me personally, anything I'm buying sort of sub 20 cents, I'm not going to be selling. It's just for the future to sell off in that instance. So anything I get down in these lower regions, absolutely fantastic. But let me just pull this back into the equation a second. I'm just drawing all over the chart here. You can see here now that the current price point of 2.3 cents. So we're very much balancing around these fib levels here. More recently, around December time, we did drop down to the 1.5 cent mark. I slightly missed some of that, but I have been accumulating between this 2 and 2.5 cent mark for sure. And I've just been literally waiting for it to stabilize a bit more over the next few days. If it does around this area, I'll be doing a bit more DCAing. But to be honest, the difference between 2 cents and 2.2 cents isn't significantly different, unless you're putting in significant amounts of money, of course, obviously. But just measure the risk yourselves, do your own research. Obviously, this is not advice or anything, it's just my opinion. But that's what I'm waiting for personally, just this extra hopeful bounce back to just sub 2 cents or around that 2 cents mark to enter a bit more capital in that DCA opportunity. Will it come back down to these regions? Absolutely possible. I think we need to look historically again, literally all the way back to 2020, to be honest. If we took away up till June last year, there was a huge significant gap with Vechain. It had a massive, amazing ride, a lot of potential around it and developments occurring, as well as the narratives and people shilling it and this, that and the other on YouTube, etc. But I just wanted to react to this point here that we are literally testing these previous regions that we saw around July 2020, and only just recently in the last sort of 6 months have we tested these areas again, and it's had some good stability, which shows there's a lot of holders out there. They're trying to keep it stable. It did dip down like most of the market did back here in January, but albeit it didn't last very long and it pulled itself back up. So it's this kind of area that I'm interested in, where it is roughly around now, around this 2 cent fib tracement level, to take advantage of that. Because as I said, you can see the resistance here. You can see the resistance here. Yes, it dropped down, but it's pulled itself back up, and it's trying to mess around with this area again. As I said, something other than the 6 months ago, haven't seen for over 2 years, which is quite incredible, really. So keep an eye on this one. As I said, I will be still looking at buy orders at these 1.5 cent marks, and even maybe potentially lower, just triggering down to perhaps the low region of 1 cent. But I'm not going to play those limit orders in just yet until I see what's going on here. I'm not predicting the future. I can't. All I can do is measure what's going on right now, and based on the data that we see from previous history of the Vechain movements. But I think it's very interesting. In fact, I'm just going to draw a few key markers in here for the next video, which is literally on this bounce mark here, and this mark down here as well. If it lets me do another one, it should do. Yeah, this is the kind of area that I'm looking to have an interest in for some extra DCAing. If it bounces back up, well, I've got a big accumulation of Vechain, and as I said, to be honest, in the long-term scheme of things, it's great to obviously get them as low as possible. But me personally, I'm still not going to be angry if I'm buying them at the 10 cent level or 15 cent level, because I think this is going to have a phenomenal future as supply chain management develops further, as Vechain develops further, not just in that sector, but all the others as well. I think it's going to be very interesting indeed to see the massive gain opportunities in this kind of project. And finally as well, on the RSIs, 45 currently on the 14-day and 48 on the 28-day. Not quite as low as it was a couple of days ago, but again, just seeing if there's some stability over the next few days and see what position that is. If that 14-day comes back to around the 40 mark, that's a good signal for me personally. And the 28-day showing around 44, 45, spot on again for me personally as well. Performance indicators on the right hand side showing a bit of negativity on the 1 week and the 3 months, which is expected because the whole market's been kind of like dragging itself out a bit and certainly downwards. Albeit Vechain is quite, possibly one of the most stable ones out there, and one of the most consistent But the 6 months on the long version, this is where I get that indication in my head that we're not quite finished yet with this whole kind of cycle anyway on the downward trend. And that's where I might start seeing that 1.5 cent mark, maybe even down to the 1 cent as time goes by further. I don't anticipate a full massive bull cycle for quite some time. So I think there's good opportunity here to really assess this. And if Vechain's new to you, definitely look at our intro video, look at some other channels as well. That's how I learned about it. That's how I got more intrigued about it. And always think open-mindedly as well about all the other aspects of it, like AI, IoT, robotics, all of these things. It's very important to not just channel and focus exactly what they're doing, but also the full infrastructure of what they're working towards and working with as well. So with that in mind, guys, hopefully someone's learned something or at least enjoyed the video. Again, don't forget to smash that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And yeah, we'll do some more Vechain updates as and when we can, and we'll certainly keep trying to do the live show every week as well on each Thursday, hopefully. But yeah, keep an eye out for that. But until the next Vechain video, thanks for watching this one, and we'll see you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.